Bruno had been at Riverside Animal Shelter for 843 days. The staff knew the exact number because they tracked the long-term residents with a mixture of hope and heartbreak, watching the counter climb while adoption prospects dwindled. At 4 years old, Bruno was a large mixed breed, part German Shepherd, part Labrador, part something else nobody could identify. He weighed 85 pounds, had a shaggy brown coat that always looked slightly unkempt, and possessed eyes that seemed to carry a sadness that matched his circumstances. "He's useless," the previous owner had said when surrendering Bruno 2 years earlier. "Can't hunt, can't guard, barks at nothing, scared of his own shadow, waste of food and space." The surrender form listed Bruno's reason for relinquishment as behavioral issues and lack of utility, which was shelter code for a dog that hadn't lived up to someone's expectations. The truth was more complicated. Bruno had been purchased as a puppy by a man who wanted a working dog, something to intimidate trespassers and retrieve game during hunting season. But Bruno had proven too gentle for guarding and too hesitant for hunting. He flinched at loud noises, avoided confrontation, and preferred sitting quietly beside people over any kind of active work. To an owner who valued aggression and utility, Bruno was indeed useless. But to the shelter staff, Bruno was something else entirely. "He's the sweetest dog we have," said Maria Santos, the shelter's lead caretaker. "Gentle with other dogs, patient with cats, absolutely loving with people. He just needs the right family." The problem was finding that family. Large dogs stayed in shelters longer than small ones, mixed breeds longer than purebreds, and dogs labeled with behavioral issues, even when those issues were simply not being aggressive enough, often never found homes at all. Potential adopters would walk past Bruno's kennel with barely a glance. "Too big, too old, looks depressed. I want a puppy." Bruno would watch them pass, his tail giving a hopeful wag that would fade when they moved on to the next kennel. After 2 years, even his hope seemed diminished. He spent most days lying in his kennel, occasionally playing with the staff who loved him, but mostly just existing in the limbo of long-term shelter life. The shelter had a policy. After 3 years, difficult-to-adopt dogs were transferred to a sanctuary facility where they could live out their lives without the stress of constant kennel living and failed adoption hopes. Bruno was approaching that 3-year mark, and while sanctuary was better than euthanasia, it felt like giving up, admitting that this sweet, gentle dog would never find a real home. In early January, a family visited the shelter, the Thompsons, looking for a dog for their 8-year-old daughter, Emma. Maria showed them several options: a peppy beagle, a friendly pit bull mix, a gentle golden retriever blend. But Emma, shy and quiet like Bruno himself, was drawn to the large brown dog sitting calmly in the corner kennel. "What about him?" Emma asked, pointing to Bruno. Maria hesitated. The Thompsons lived near Miller's Lake, a popular spot that froze solid every winter. She knew families with children near water typically wanted protective dogs, alert dogs, dogs that would sound alarms and guard vigilantly. Bruno was none of those things. But Emma's face was hopeful, and Bruno had stood up, tail wagging slowly, meeting the child's gaze with his sad, gentle eyes. "That's Bruno," Maria said. "He's been here for a long time. He's very gentle, great with kids, but he's not a guard dog or a working dog. His previous owner called him useless because he wasn't aggressive enough. He's just a companion, a friend." Emma approached the kennel, and Bruno pressed his nose against the chain link, his tail picking up speed. The girl reached her fingers through, and Bruno gently licked them, making Emma giggle, the first sound of pure joy Maria had heard from the shy child. "I like him," Emma said. "Can we meet him?" The meeting went perfectly. Bruno was calm, affectionate, patient with Emma's cautious petting. He didn't jump or bark or show any of the overexcitement that sometimes scared nervous children. He simply sat beside Emma, leaning gently against her, accepting her affection with quiet gratitude. The Thompsons, seeing their daughter's connection to this overlooked dog, decided to give Bruno a chance. "We'll take him on a trial adoption," Mr. Thompson said. 2 weeks to see if it works out." Maria completed the paperwork with trembling hands. After 843 days, Bruno was going home, not to sanctuary, not to another kennel, but to a real family. As the Thompsons led Bruno out of the shelter, Maria whispered a prayer that this gentle dog, this useless companion, would finally find where he belonged. Bruno looked back once at the shelter, then forward toward the car, toward Emma holding his leash, toward something he hadn't had in 843 days. Hope. The first week at the Thompson house was an adjustment for everyone. Bruno had spent so long in a kennel that the simple freedom of a home overwhelmed him. He would stand in doorways, uncertain whether he was allowed to enter rooms. He would flinch at sudden movements, conditioned by years of people walking past without choosing him. He slept in the corner of Emma's room, on the dog bed the Thompsons had bought him, but he seemed constantly ready to be returned, as if waiting for the disappointment he'd learned to expect. Emma, however, was patient in ways that surprised her parents. The shy 8-year-old who struggled to make friends at school became Bruno's gentle advocate and companion. She would sit beside him for hours, reading aloud from her books, her voice soft and steady. She never demanded affection or activity. She simply existed alongside Bruno, letting him adjust at his own pace. "Emma, why don't you take Bruno outside and play?" her mother Jennifer would suggest. "He's not ready yet, Mom," Emma would reply wisely. "He needs to learn it's safe here first." Jennifer Thompson watched this unlikely bond form with mixed emotions. She had hoped a dog would bring Emma out of her shell, make her more active and social. Instead, Emma had found a companion as introverted and cautious as herself. It wasn't what Jennifer had envisioned, but she couldn't deny the gentle happiness that had entered her daughter's life. Mr. Thompson, David, was more skeptical. "The dog just lies around all day. Maria said he wasn't a working dog, but I expected more. Something, energy, personality, anything." He hadn't wanted a large dog in the first place, had worried about shedding and expenses and the commitment. Bruno's quiet presence felt like a burden rather than a blessing, but Emma loved Bruno with a fierce devotion that brooked no criticism. "He's perfect," she would insist. "He's exactly what I wanted. He doesn't have to do tricks or be exciting. He just has to be Bruno." By the second week, Bruno began to relax incrementally. He would venture into rooms without hesitation. He would approach the Thompsons for gentle pets. His tail wagged more frequently. He even played, not energetically, but in his own careful way, carrying toys to Emma and engaging in soft tug-of-war games that never got rough. The trial adoption period ended, and despite David's reservations, the Thompsons decided to keep Bruno. Emma's joy at the decision was so pure and complete that even David found himself softening toward the gentle giant who had claimed his daughter's heart. "Okay, Bruno stays," David announced. "But he's your responsibility, Emma. Feeding, walking, cleaning up after him, that's on you." "I promise, Daddy. I'll take such good care of him. He's my best friend." And so Bruno officially became part of the Thompson family. He was still quiet, still gentle, still the dog his previous owner had called useless. But to Emma, he was everything. The Thompson house sat 3 blocks from Miller's Lake, a popular recreational area that attracted families year-round. In summer, people swam and fished. In winter, when temperatures dropped below freezing for sustained periods, the lake froze solid enough for ice skating and hockey. Local authorities monitored the ice thickness and posted safety warnings, but every winter there were close calls. People venturing onto ice that wasn't quite solid enough, creating dangerous situations. January turned to February, and the temperatures plummeted. Miller's Lake froze early that year, with ice forming thick and smooth. By mid-February, the Park Service had declared the ice safe for skating, and families descended on the lake every weekend. Emma begged to go skating, and despite the cold, Jennifer relented. "Can Bruno come?" Emma asked as they prepared. "Honey, Bruno stays inside when it's this cold," Jennifer replied. "He's not really an outdoor dog. He'll be fine here." But Emma's face fell with such genuine distress that Jennifer reconsidered. "Okay, we'll bring him. But he stays on his leash, and if he gets too cold, we bring him straight home." They walked to the lake that Saturday afternoon, Emma, Jennifer, and Bruno on his leash. The lake was crowded with families, children skating in colorful winter gear, adults standing around fire pits at the edges. Emma joined other children on the ice, while Jennifer stood at the shore, keeping watch, Bruno sitting calmly beside her. Bruno watched the activity with his usual quiet attention. His eyes tracked movements, his ears perked at sounds, but he made no attempt to join the chaos. He simply observed, content to be near Emma even if he couldn't fully participate. After an hour, Emma took a break, skating to shore to warm up by the fire pit. "Bruno!" she called happily, and Bruno's tail wagged at her voice. She hugged him around his thick neck, not caring that his fur was cold, just happy to be near her friend. "Having fun?" Jennifer asked. "So much fun. Can I go back out?" "One more hour, then we head home before it gets dark." Emma skated away, joining a group of children playing a game that involved chasing each other across the ice. Jennifer turned to chat with another parent, Bruno's leash wrapped around her wrist. The dog sat patiently, watching Emma with the focused attention that had become his characteristic way of monitoring his favorite person. Then everything changed in seconds. A loud crack echoed across the lake, not dramatic enough to alarm most people, but ominous to those who understood ice. A section of ice near the far shore, where some older kids had been skating despite warnings about that area's thinner coverage, suddenly gave way. A boy, maybe 12 years old, went through the ice into the freezing water below. Screams erupted. Adults rushed toward the break, but the ice was unstable in that section, and they couldn't get close. The boy was thrashing, trying to grab the edge of the ice, but the cold water was already affecting his movements. His cries for help grew weaker. Someone called 911. Others tried to form a human chain to reach him, but the ice cracked under their weight, forcing them back. Precious seconds ticked by as the boy's struggles grew less coordinated, as hypothermia set in, as his young body began shutting down from the cold. Bruno, who had been sitting calmly beside Jennifer, suddenly stood. His entire demeanor changed. The quiet, passive dog vanished, replaced by something Jennifer had never seen before. Focused intensity. Bruno's eyes locked on the boy in the water. A low whine escaped his throat. "Bruno, it's okay," Jennifer began, tightening her grip on his leash. But Bruno pulled forward with unexpected strength, yanking the leash from Jennifer's wrist. Before she could react, before anyone could stop him, Bruno was running across the ice toward the break, toward the drowning boy, toward danger that he had every reason to fear, but didn't hesitate to confront. "Bruno!" Jennifer screamed. "Come back!" But Bruno didn't stop. The useless shelter dog, the gentle giant who flinched at loud noises and avoided confrontation, was running full speed across unstable ice toward a child he didn't know, driven by something deeper than training or utility, driven by an instinct to help that no one knew he possessed. Bruno's weight worked against him and for him simultaneously. As he ran across the ice toward the break, he was heavy enough that the already stressed ice cracked further under his paws. But he was also strong enough, large enough, to power through the breaking surface with determination that overrode any sense of self-preservation. The boy in the water had stopped struggling. His face was pale, his eyes unfocused, his body barely keeping his head above the surface. Hypothermia was setting in fast. The water temperature was just above freezing, and every second in it was life-threatening. Bruno reached the edge of the ice break and did something no one expected. He didn't try to jump in or swim. Instead, he dropped flat on his belly, distributing his weight across the ice, and crawled forward until his head was over the break. He grabbed the back of the boy's jacket with his teeth, not biting but gripping firmly, and began pulling backward. The boy, barely conscious, couldn't help. His body was dead weight, waterlogged and cold, but Bruno pulled with steady strength, inch by inch, dragging the boy toward more stable ice. His paws scrambled for purchase, his muscles strained, but he didn't let go. Adults finally reached them, forming a chain across the ice, grabbing the boy and pulling him fully out of the water. Emergency responders, who had just arrived, took over, wrapping the boy in heated blankets, checking vitals, beginning treatment for hypothermia. The boy was alive, unconscious but alive, and being rushed to an ambulance. Bruno stood at the edge of the break, dripping and shivering violently, his brown fur dark with water, ice forming on his coat. The heroic determination that had driven him across the ice had faded, leaving behind the gentle, frightened dog he'd always been. He looked around for Emma, for Jennifer, for familiar faces in the chaos. Jennifer reached him, tears streaming down her face, throwing her arms around his soaked, freezing body. "Bruno! Oh my God, Bruno! You saved him! You saved that boy!" Emma arrived moments later, sobbing, wrapping herself around Bruno from the other side. "Bruno, you're okay! You're okay!" Emergency personnel insisted on checking Bruno over. He was wet, cold, shivering badly, but miraculously uninjured. "We need to get him somewhere warm immediately," a paramedic advised. "He's at risk for hypothermia too." The Thompsons rushed Bruno home, toweling him dry, wrapping him in blankets, positioning him near the fireplace. Bruno lay shaking for an hour, but gradually warmth returned to his body. Emma stayed beside him the entire time, her hand on his head, whispering thank yous and promises that he was safe, that he was home, that he was the best dog in the world. David Thompson, who had been skeptical of Bruno from the beginning, knelt beside the dog with an expression of stunned awe. "I called him boring. I said he wasn't worth the trouble. I almost convinced Jennifer to return him after the trial period." His voice broke. "That dog just saved a child's life. He didn't hesitate, didn't calculate, just acted. What kind of person judges a dog as useless because he's gentle? A person who doesn't understand what really matters," Jennifer said softly. "Bruno isn't a working dog or a guard dog. He's something better. He's compassionate. He saw someone in danger and he helped. That's not useless. That's heroic." News of the rescue spread rapidly through the community. By evening, reporters were calling, neighbors were stopping by, and the boy's family, the Martins, had come to thank the Thompsons and meet Bruno personally. "Our son Tommy is alive because of your dog," Mrs. Martin said, crying as she stroked Bruno's head. "The doctors said another minute in that water and he wouldn't have made it. Bruno gave us our son back. How do we even begin to thank you?" "You don't have to thank us," Emma said simply. "Bruno's just a good dog. People didn't see it before, but it was always there." That night, as Bruno slept peacefully in Emma's room, warm, dry, safe, the little girl lay beside him with her arms around his neck. "They called you useless," she whispered, "but you're the most useful dog ever. You saved someone. You're a hero, Bruno. You're my hero." Bruno's tail gave a gentle wag in his sleep, and Emma smiled through her tears, knowing that the shelter dog nobody wanted had proven he had value beyond measure, purpose beyond anyone's narrow definitions, and a heart bigger than anyone had recognized. The local news picked up Tommy Martin's rescue by Monday morning. "Shelter dog saves child from frozen lake," read the headline, accompanied by photos of Bruno and video footage from bystanders' phones showing the dramatic rescue. By evening, the story had gone viral, shared thousands of times across social media, with comments praising Bruno's heroism and criticizing the previous owner who had labeled him useless. Maria Santos from Riverside Animal Shelter called the Thompsons, crying with joy. "I always knew Bruno was special. I just knew it. But even I didn't imagine this. He spent 843 days in our shelter, and now the whole world is seeing what we saw all along. The attention was overwhelming. News crews camped outside the Thompson house. Reporters wanted interviews. Animal advocacy organizations requested to feature Bruno's story. The mayor announced plans to honor Bruno with a ceremony. But most importantly, Riverside Animal Shelter began receiving calls, hundreds of them, from people wanting to adopt dogs like Bruno. "We have 20 large older dogs that have been here for over a year," Maria told a reporter. "Before Bruno's story went viral, I couldn't get anyone to even look at them. Now I have a waiting list. People are finally understanding that the quiet dogs, the gentle dogs, the ones that don't fit someone's narrow definition of useful, they have value, they have worth. Bruno proved it." The shift in public perception extended beyond just dogs. Bruno's story sparked conversations about how society judges worth and utility. Opinion pieces appeared in newspapers. What we can learn from a useless shelter dog. Think pieces explored how humans often dismiss gentleness as weakness, how we value aggression and utility over compassion and presence. Bruno wasn't trained to rescue, one animal behaviorist explained on television. He wasn't bred for it, wasn't rewarded for it, had no expectation of it. He just saw a child in danger and helped because that's who he is at his core. A dog with empathy and courage that manifested when it mattered most. We label animals useless when they don't serve our purposes, but maybe we're the ones with flawed definitions of useful. Tommy Martin recovered fully from his hypothermia, spending 3 days in the hospital before being released with no permanent damage. The first thing he asked upon returning home was to meet Bruno properly. The Martins and Thompsons arranged a meeting at a park, and Tommy, pale but healthy, knelt down to hug the dog who had saved him. "Thank you, Bruno," Tommy said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't remember much from the lake, but my mom told me you pulled me out. You saved my life." Bruno licked Tommy's face gently, tail wagging, accepting the boy's gratitude with his characteristic quiet grace. The two families took photos together, 2 children and 1 remarkable dog, evidence that heroism didn't always look like what people expected. The mayor's ceremony took place 2 weeks after the rescue. City Hall was packed with residents, media, and animal welfare advocates. Bruno, wearing a special collar gifted by a local pet store, sat calmly beside Emma while officials gave speeches about bravery, compassion, and reconsidering our definitions of worth. "Bruno reminds us that value isn't always obvious," the mayor said. "That the gentlest creatures can be the most courageous, that what some dismiss as useless might actually be invaluable. On behalf of our city, I'm honored to present Bruno with the Civilian Heroism Medal and to declare him an official hero of our community." They placed the medal around Bruno's neck, and the audience erupted in applause. Bruno, overwhelmed by the noise and attention, pressed against Emma's side, finding comfort in the familiar presence of his favorite person. Emma hugged him tightly, whispering that it was okay, that she was proud of him, that he could go home soon. But the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. Bruno's previous owner, the man who had surrendered him as useless, came forward publicly with an apology. In the letter read at the ceremony, he wrote, "I called Bruno useless because he didn't meet my expectations of what a dog should be. He wasn't aggressive enough, wasn't driven enough, wasn't the hunting or guard dog I wanted. I was wrong. Bruno wasn't useless. I was blind. I couldn't see past my own narrow needs to recognize the value of gentleness, compassion, and quiet loyalty. Bruno saved a child's life using qualities I dismissed as weaknesses. I was the failure, not him. I'm sorry for the years he spent in a shelter because I was too ignorant to appreciate what I had. I hope his new family understands what I couldn't, that Bruno is extraordinary, exactly as he is." The apology resonated with many people who recognized themselves in it. People who had dismissed employees for not being aggressive enough, children for being too quiet, friends for being too gentle. Bruno's story became a mirror reflecting society's tendency to value certain traits while diminishing others equally important. Riverside Animal Shelter reported that within a month of Bruno's story going viral, their adoption rate increased by 400%. The useless dogs, the old ones, the large ones, the gentle ones, the ones that didn't fit standard definitions of valuable, all found homes. Maria Santos wept with joy as kennel after kennel emptied, as the dogs she had loved and advocated for finally received the chance Bruno had gotten. Bruno didn't just save Tommy, Maria told reporters. He saved hundreds of other dogs by showing people that worth isn't always obvious, that the discarded often have the most to offer, that gentleness is its own form of strength. Emma Thompson had never been an outspoken child. At 8 years old, she was quiet in class, struggled to make friends, preferred books to playground games. But Bruno's rescue changed something in her. Watching the world celebrate her gentle dog, seeing how one moment of courage could shift perspectives, Emma found her voice. "Mom, I want to help other dogs like Bruno," Emma announced one evening. "Dogs that people don't want because they're too quiet or too old or not useful enough." Bruno spent 843 days in that shelter. That's so long. "We have to help the other Brunos." Jennifer Thompson looked at her shy daughter, seeing a determination she had never witnessed before. "What did you have in mind?" "A foundation, like the Willow Foundation that helped people keep their horses. But for shelter dogs that nobody wants, we could help pay for their care, find them homes, show people they're valuable." Jennifer had to smile at the reference. She had read Emma, the story of Willow and Sarah, about compassion changing lives. Of course, Emma would want to create something similar. "That's a big undertaking, sweetie. Foundations need money, organization, adult involvement." "But you're an adult, Mom, and Dad works at the bank. He knows about money stuff. And Bruno's famous now. People would donate. We could really help." Jennifer discussed it with David that night, expecting skepticism from her pragmatic husband. Instead, David surprised her. "Emma's right." Bruno's story resonated with people because it challenged how we judge worth. If we could channel that into actually helping dogs like he used to be, that's worth doing. Within weeks, the Bruno Foundation was established. David handled the legal and financial setup. Jennifer managed operations and outreach. But Emma was the heart, the 8-year-old who insisted on being involved in every decision, who wrote appeals in her careful handwriting, who spoke at community events with Bruno beside her, both of them quiet but effective advocates. The Foundation's mission was specific: provide financial support for long-term shelter residents, especially large, older or gentle dogs that struggled to find homes. They would cover medical expenses, training if needed, marketing to showcase each dog's unique personality, and adoption incentives for families willing to give useless dogs a chance. Donations poured in. Bruno's story had touched people deeply, and they wanted to be part of the solution. Within 3 months, the foundation had raised $200,000. Within 6 months, they had partnered with 15 shelters across the state. Within a year, they had helped place over 300 dogs that had been considered unadoptable. Each adoption came with a letter that Emma insisted on writing personally. "Dear adopter name, thank you for adopting. Dog name. People said my dog Bruno was useless, but he saved a boy's life. People probably said your new dog was useless too, but that's not true. Every dog has value. Some are quiet heroes like Bruno. Some are loyal friends. Some make us laugh or comfort us when we're sad. Being useful doesn't mean being aggressive or perfect. It means being loved and giving love back. Thank you for seeing what other people missed. Love, Emma Thompson and Bruno." The personal touch mattered. Adopters would frame Emma's letters, post them online, share their own stories of dogs that had proven everyone wrong. The Bruno Foundation became not just a funding source, but a movement, a challenge to society's definitions of worth and utility. Maria Santos from Riverside Animal Shelter became a close partner in the foundation's work. "I've been in animal welfare for 20 years, she told Emma during one of the girls' visits to the shelter. "I've seen trends come and go. People want purebreds, then they want rescues, then they want puppies. But I've never seen anything like what Bruno started. He didn't just save Tommy, he shifted the entire conversation about shelter dogs. That's historic." Emma, sitting on the floor with Bruno and 3 other large dogs that had been at the shelter for over a year, smiled. Bruno didn't mean to be historic. He just did what good dogs do. He helped. But maybe that's the point. Maybe being good is more important than being useful. The foundation expanded its mission beyond just funding. They created educational programs for schools about responsible pet ownership and recognizing value in all creatures. They produced videos showcasing long-term shelter residents, highlighting their gentle personalities rather than working abilities. They partnered with training programs to help dogs with specific anxieties or behaviors become more adoptable without changing their fundamental gentle natures. One of their most successful initiatives was the Bruno Challenge. They asked people to share stories and photos of their useless pets doing extraordinary things. The social media campaign exploded. Thousands of people posted about their quiet dogs, their anxious cats, their old animals that nobody else wanted, all doing small, heroic acts. Comforting sick owners, alerting families to danger, providing emotional support during crisis, or simply being steadfast companions through difficult times. "Heroism isn't always dramatic," Emma said in an interview on a national morning show, Bruno sitting calmly beside her chair. "Most of the time it's quiet. It's being there when someone needs you. It's being gentle and patient and kind." Bruno was like that for 843 days in the shelter, being gentle with everyone even though nobody chose him. That was heroic too, even before he saved Tommy. We just didn't see it. The interviewer, visibly moved, asked, "What do you want people to learn from Bruno's story?" Emma looked at Bruno, this gentle giant who had changed her life and so many others, and said simply, "That we're wrong about what matters. We think strength means being tough or aggressive. We think useful means doing jobs or tricks. But the most important thing is having a good heart. Bruno has the best heart. He always did. People just needed to notice." 3 years after Bruno pulled Tommy Martin from the frozen lake, the ripple effects of that moment continued expanding. Bruno was now 7 years old. His muzzle showing grey, his movement slightly slower, but his gentle nature unchanged. He still lived with the Thompsons, still slept in Emma's room, still spent his days being the quiet companion he had always been. But the world around him had transformed. The Bruno Foundation had grown into a multi-state organization with partnerships across the country. They had facilitated the adoption of over 2,000 unadoptable dogs. Shelter euthanasia rates for large, older and gentle dogs had dropped by 30% in states where the foundation operated. The cultural shift Bruno's rescue had initiated was measurable and significant. Emma, now 11, had become a confident speaker and advocate. She traveled with her parents to shelters, schools and conferences, telling Bruno's story and challenging people to reconsider their assumptions. She had started a blog documenting the dogs helped by the foundation, each entry personally written, each one emphasizing that gentleness was strength, that quiet dogs had loud impacts. Tommy Martin, now 15, had become a volunteer with the foundation and a spokesperson for water safety. He told his story at schools and community events, how his youthful overconfidence had put him on thin ice, how he had nearly died, how a dog nobody wanted had saved him. "I wouldn't be here without Bruno," Tommy would say. "When people ask me what a hero looks like, I tell them sometimes it's a dog that everyone else called useless. Sometimes the most valuable things are the ones we almost throw away." The Foundation's work attracted academic attention. Researchers studying animal behavior, empathy, and heroism began examining Bruno's case. One study, published in a peer-reviewed journal, analyzed the footage of Bruno's rescue and concluded, the subject displayed remarkable assessment of the situation, apparent understanding of danger, and self-sacrificing behavior with no prior training or expectation of reward. This suggests innate pro-social behavior and cognitive sophistication, often underestimated in canines, particularly those labeled as lower value by human standards. Bruno's actions provide evidence that gentleness and heroism are not mutually exclusive traits, and that human judgment of animal utility may miss crucial dimensions of animal cognition and character. The study sparked broader conversations in veterinary and behavioral science communities about how dogs were evaluated, trained, and valued. Training programs began incorporating empathy assessments alongside traditional skill measurements. Adoption protocols started considering emotional intelligence and gentle temperament as valuable traits rather than neutral or negative qualities. But perhaps the most significant impact was personal rather than systematic. Hundreds of families reached out to the Thompsons and the Foundation with stories of their own useless pets, becoming heroes in small and large ways. These stories formed a powerful counter-narrative to society's obsession with utility and performance. One family wrote, "Our dog Sadie was returned to the shelter 3 times for being too timid. We adopted her anyway. Last year, she alerted us to a gas leak in our home at 3 a.m. The fire department said we would have died in our sleep if she hadn't woken us. Everyone said she was useless. She saved our lives." Another shared, "My son has severe autism and struggles with emotional regulation. Our useless shelter dog Max is the only one who can calm him during meltdowns. No training, no special skills, just patience and gentleness that therapists and medications couldn't provide. Max isn't useless. He's irreplaceable." The letters kept coming, each one evidence that Bruno's story had validated countless other quiet acts of heroism that had previously gone unrecognized. The Foundation created a public archive of these stories, a growing testimony to the value of gentle creatures in a world that often celebrated only the bold and aggressive. Riverside Animal Shelter, where Bruno had spent 843 days, underwent its own transformation. They renamed their long-term resident wing the Bruno Wing and implemented a program where long-term dogs received enhanced socialization, enrichment, and publicity. Their adoption rate for dogs staying longer than 6 months increased to 95%, compared to less than 40% before Bruno's rescue. Maria Santos retired from daily shelter operations, but remained active in the Bruno Foundation as a consultant and advocate. "Bruno changed everything," she reflected in an interview on the Foundation's 3rd anniversary. "Not just for the dogs we've helped directly, but for how people think about animals, about value, about what deserves to be celebrated. Every time I see a family adopting a senior dog, or a shy dog, or a large dog that doesn't fit the ideal profile, I think of Bruno sitting in that kennel for 843 days, waiting for someone to see past useless to valuable." On the anniversary of the rescue each February, the Thompsons and Martins gathered at Miller's Lake, now featuring a memorial plaque honoring Bruno's heroism and promoting water safety. They would stand at the spot where Tommy had gone through the ice, where Bruno had pulled him out, where one moment had changed so many lives. "Do you remember it?" People always asked Bruno, as if the dog might suddenly speak and confirm his understanding of that day's significance. But Bruno just sat calmly, grey muzzle resting on Emma's lap, tail giving occasional lazy wags, being exactly what he had always been. A gentle, quiet presence that meant everything to the people who loved him. Bruno passed away peacefully in his sleep at age 9, surrounded by the Thompson family. Emma, now 13, held him as his breathing slowed and stopped, whispering, "Thank you and I love you until the end." The grief was profound and immediate, but so too was the gratitude for the 6 years Bruno had been part of their lives. News of Bruno's death prompted an unexpected outpouring of national mourning. The dog who had saved Tommy Martin and inspired a movement had touched millions who had never met him. Social media filled with tributes, shelters lowered flags, and people shared stories of the useless animals Bruno had inspired them to adopt. The funeral held at Riverside Animal Shelter drew hundreds. Tommy Martin gave a eulogy. "Bruno saved my life when I was 12, but he saved more than just me. He saved every dog that found a home because his story changed how people thought about value. He saved every person who found companionship with a gentle animal they might have overlooked." Bruno was a hero in one dramatic moment, but he was also a hero in every quiet day of his life, just by being himself. Emma spoke too, crying but determined. "When we adopted Bruno from this shelter, people thought we were getting a useless dog. But Bruno taught me that useful is whatever makes life better, whatever brings love and comfort and courage when it's needed." Bruno was useful every single day. He was useful when he saved Tommy, but he was also useful when he sat with me while I was sad, when he made me feel brave enough to speak up, when he showed me that quiet and gentle is okay. I'll miss him forever, but I'll never forget what he taught me about what really matters. The Bruno Foundation continued and expanded after his death, now operating in 12 states, with partnerships spanning the country. They established the Bruno Memorial Scholarship for veterinary students specializing in animal behavior and welfare. They funded research into canine cognition and empathy. They continued placing hundreds of unadoptable dogs annually, each adoption carrying forward Bruno's legacy. Emma grew up to study animal behavior and social work, dedicating her career to the intersection of animal welfare and human understanding. She remained actively involved in the foundation her family had started, but also branched into broader advocacy, challenging systems that dismissed the gentle, the quiet, the nonconformist, whether animal or human. Bruno showed me that society's definitions of useful and valuable are often wrong, Emma said in a college admissions essay. That's true for dogs, but it's also true for people. How many humans are dismissed as useless because they don't fit aggressive, competitive, extroverted ideals? How many gentle souls are overlooked because we don't value what they offer? Bruno's legacy isn't just about dogs. It's about reconsidering worth entirely. Tommy Martin became a therapist specializing in childhood trauma, partly motivated by his own near-death experience, but more by the lesson Bruno had taught him about second chances and hidden value. He volunteered with the foundation throughout high school and college, speaking about his rescue, about the dog who saved him, about recognizing worth in unexpected places. David Thompson, who had initially been skeptical of Bruno, became one of the foundation's biggest advocates and donors. "I almost convinced my family to return that dog," he would tell people. "I thought he was boring, useless, a waste of space. I was completely wrong, and that near mistake taught me to question my judgments about everyone, animals and humans. How many times do we dismiss people or creatures because they don't meet our arbitrary standards? How much value do we miss because we're too busy looking for utility in narrow, conventional terms?" The shelter where Bruno had spent 843 days became something of a pilgrimage site for animal welfare advocates. People toured the Bruno Wing, saw the photos and news clippings documenting his story, and often left inspired to adopt long-term residents at their own local shelters. Maria Santos led many of these tours, her voice still breaking when she described the gentle dog nobody wanted who had changed the world. 5 years after Bruno's death, a statue was erected at Miller's Lake in his memory. It depicted Bruno in mid-rescue, pulling a child from the water, his expression captured in bronze as determined and gentle simultaneously. The plaque read, Bruno, 2015-2024. They called him useless because he was too gentle for their purposes. On one winter day, he pulled a child from a frozen lake, proving that gentleness and heroism coexist. But his true legacy isn't one dramatic rescue. It's the thousands of useless animals who found homes because his story changed how we define worth. Bruno reminds us, value isn't always loud or aggressive or obvious. Sometimes the most valuable things are the quietest, the gentlest, the most overlooked. May we all learn to see what Bruno saw, that every life has purpose, every being has worth, and love is the most useful thing of all. Emma attended the statue unveiling at 19, now a college student, still dedicated to the cause Bruno had inspired. As she stood before the bronze depiction of the dog who had changed her life and so many others, she thought about the interconnected nature of impact, how one gentle dog's heroic moment had rippled outward, changing shelters, changing laws, changing hearts. "Thank you, Bruno," Emma whispered, touching the bronze statue, "for saving Tommy, for saving all those other dogs, for saving me, for teaching us that being useful isn't about aggression or performance. It's about having a good heart and using it when it matters most." The Bruno Foundation still operates today, having facilitated over 10,000 adoptions and fundamentally shifted the conversation about animal worth and welfare. Every dog they help carry forward Bruno's legacy, proof that the discarded often have the most to offer, that gentleness is its own form of strength, and that society's labels, useless, worthless, unadoptable, are often failures of perception rather than actual descriptions of value. Bruno, the dog nobody wanted for 843 days, who pulled a child from a frozen lake and inspired a movement, remains a symbol of everything humans often miss when we judge too quickly, demand too much, and value the wrong things. His story endures not just as one dramatic rescue, but as a profound challenge to reconsider what we label useless, to recognize worth in unexpected places, and to understand that heroes come in all forms, including quiet, gentle dogs that the world almost threw away. Thank you for experiencing Bruno's incredible journey from unwanted shelter dog to life-saving hero. Bruno spent 843 days being called useless simply because he was gentle, patient, and kind instead of aggressive and useful. Then he saved a child's life and inspired thousands of adoptions of dogs just like him. His story isn't just about one rescue. It's about challenging how we define worth in animals and humans alike. If this story moved you, share it immediately. Share it with anyone considering adopting a shelter pet, anyone who works in animal welfare, anyone who has ever been called too quiet or not enough, anyone who needs to understand that gentleness is strength. Let Bruno's legacy continue through your shares. Like and subscribe for more true stories about unlikely heroes, animals that change lives, and movements sparked by single moments of courage. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that could change how you see worth and value. But don't just watch, take action. Visit your local shelter and ask about long-term residents, especially large, older, or gentle dogs that struggle to find homes. Consider adopting the dog that everyone else overlooks. Support organizations like the Bruno Foundation that help unadoptable animals. Challenge yourself to reconsider what useful means in your own life. Leave a comment. Have you adopted a useless pet that proved everyone wrong? Have you been dismissed for being too gentle? What does Bruno's story mean to you? Your voice could inspire someone else to see value where others see nothing. Remember, they called Bruno useless because he was gentle. Then he pulled a child from a frozen lake and changed how the world thinks about worth. The quietest creatures often have the loudest impacts. The gentlest hearts often hold the greatest courage. Don't let anyone, including yourself, dismiss value simply because it doesn't look aggressive or obvious. Share this widely, adopt a useless animal, and help us create a world where worth is measured by heart rather than utility. Bruno's legacy continues through every overlooked dog that finds a home, every gentle person who finds validation, every moment we choose compassion over narrow definitions of value. Subscribe now. Your next inspiration is one story away.